What's up, guys? It's Meg, and it's that time of the week again where we get to talk about the best show on television, AMC's The Walking Dead. Today we're talking about season 6, episode 1, the season premiere. Wow. I can't say enough about how great this episode was. I am absolutely amazed at the quality and just everything about this episode. It opened with such a bang. Like, they threw so much at you, and yet you're able to understand everything that's going on, and I thought that was really well done. Let's get right into the review. The black and white flashback scenes integrated so perfectly with the current time frame of the colored scenes that I was just blown away at how easily we were able to understand what was going on and differentiate between what was in the past and what was current. And the fact that these scenes, all of the black and white flashback scenes, led you right up to present day and what was going on in the present day. So by the end of the episode, the flashback scenes were in the current time frame of what was currently going on. When the episode first opened up, I was a little bit worried that they were going to skip the entire the entirety of what happened right after Pete's death and Morgan's arrival. But these scenes, these flashbacks, showed us all of the important things. They showed us the moments right after Pete's death with his talk with Morgan. They showed us Jesse and Ron and Sam grieving. They showed us Deanna grieving. They showed us Tara waking up and discovering that Noah had died. They showed us the events that are leading up to this plan to lead all the walkers away. And it was also beautifully integrated. We hear that Rick and Morgan have had a conversation off camera about the wolves and the stuff that happened with Daryl and Aaron and Morgan back at the wolves compound. So we don't get to see that conversation, but we have this interaction between Daryl and Rick, and we see that Rick has said we need to put more people on the lookout. We see him say something along the terms of, we don't need to be looking for more people to bring in. We don't need to bring in anyone else. You know, these people that are out there are on their own. And Daryl kind of, he doesn't say anything at first. He starts to walk away, but Rick can tell that he feels differently, and he asks him, he says, "Do you feel differently about that?" And Daryl says, "Yeah, I do." And I really like this about Daryl because now he believes in something, and I really like that we see that Daryl does still want to recruit people, that he has changed a little bit. When he first arrived at Alexandria, we could see that he wasn't feeling comfortable there, that he would almost rather not be in this environment at all, that he felt more comfortable being out in the wild and surviving that way, that it was hard for him to integrate back into society. And Aaron gave him this purpose. They went out on the recruiting mission. They tried to recruit, they were following the guy, they ran into the wolves situation, and they were forced to come back with Morgan. But it gave him some type of purpose here, and he understands now that it is crucial to bring people back to Alexandria that can be a helpful part of this community. And I like that we see him willing to stick up for his beliefs. Now, he may not necessarily go against Rick. He's not going to say, well, I'm going to do it this way regardless of what you think, but he is willing to state his opinions on the matter. And it's good to see him not necessarily falling in line with what Rick says. We know he always followed in Merle's footsteps. He was always in Merle's shadow, and that's how he grew up. He was never really... He can be independent, and he's a survivalist, but he was more of a follower. He was never really in that leadership position, and we see this, developing throughout all of the multiple seasons. And in season 3, where I believe it's season 3, shoot, I never can get my seasons right, but in season 3, when Rick goes and he's going back into Woodbury, and when they come back out, they have Merle and Daryl with them, and Rick, there's pretty much an ultimatum, and Daryl goes off with Merle, and he's following Merle, and we kind of see that relationship between them, and we get a feel for how they grew up and the fact that he's always been following Merle around. So when he joined Rick's group, and long after Merle, he's still been Rick's right-hand man essentially, but he's never really voiced strong opinion, voiced his strong opinions and developed his own opinions that he's been willing to voice. So it's good to see him starting to move along a different path. I absolutely loved Morgan's character in this episode, and I'm really excited to see where he's going from here on out. I especially liked the No Way Out Easter egg that we got from Morgan when he says, sometimes you're safer when there's no way out. Now in this episode, Rick was starting to sound pretty full of himself. He's talking to Morgan about how, he's basically telling how they came upon this Alexandria, what Alexandria is all about, and how the community came to be. And he's telling Morgan, he says how these people found the place in the beginning and that they've been here this whole time and they never learned how to survive, and that they realized that they didn't know how to survive and brought, allowed Rick and group to stay because they realized that. And that they brought us in, but it might already be too late. And I kind of like how Morgan's, he's very thoughtful on what Rick is saying, and Rick, to me, sounded very, like this whole time he's been saying, they need us, and he's so sure of himself. We hear another conversation between Morgan and Rick when they're putting Pete's body into the trunk of the car. Morgan, I can't remember what Morgan said precisely, but Rick says we don't have a place for killers here. And they're referring to the fact that they're not willing to bury Pete's body there. Morgan says, he says, we have a cell, meaning the place where Morgan was staying overnight. And Rick says, we don't have a place for killers here. And it's such a funny thing to say because Rick is a killer. Morgan says he's a killer. Morgan says, Rick, you're a killer. And they kind of just shut the trunk. And Morgan is questioning Rick. And he's questioning Rick's thought process. How can you say that he's a killer and how can you not call yourself a killer? Look at what you just did. Look at what you've done. Look at what we've all done to get to where we are. We're all killers. And I like that Morgan has this outside perspective. He came into the group not being a part of either group, not being a part of Rick's group, not being a part of Alexandria's group. So he's able to have this outside perspective and see everyone's point of view and see where everyone's coming from. And he also has his own mindset that all life is precious. And he sees that Rick really lacks compassion. He lacks, he's very hardened by what he's been through. And I liked how frequently throughout this episode, Morgan questions what Rick has said. So, when Rick says, we don't have a place for killers here, he questions him. He's like, well, you're a killer, I'm a killer, that sort of thing. Then when Rick had originally said, we don't take chances anymore, and Morgan said, and you shouldn't. But then we see a flashback scene where Rick is trying to force the Alexandrians to fight off walkers, and he knows that they're ill-prepared, and he's trying to prove a point. He has just finished telling Deanna that everyone needs to have weapons and everyone needs to be trained inside the walls of Alexandria. And then in order to prove his point, he sees walkers coming out and he's trying to force these people who really have no idea what they're doing and have no idea how to fight walkers. He tries to force them to man up and do it. You have to do it. This is what life is right now. And they're scared, they're frightened, they're not really capable of doing it. And Morgan steps in despite Rick's protests, and he helps them, and then everyone else runs in, and kills the walkers off. And Rick's sort of angry about it. And Morgan, he turns to him and he says, you said you don't take chances anymore. And again, Rick is, he doesn't say anything. And I think what Rick should have said is that he doesn't take chances with his own people, with his own family anymore. I think he could really care less about the rest of these people because he thinks that they're all going to die anyways. I said this already, but I really like that Morgan is able to take this step back and get a bigger perspective on things and be kind of this bug in Rick's ear, this person on his shoulder, whispering in his ear, and questioning what he's doing and the decisions that he's making. And he's being this voice of reason to Rick, and really a voice that Rick needs to hear right now. And Morgan also sees through Carol's disguise, not maybe all the way, but he definitely sees that something is different, that she's observant, and he sees through some of her, meek disguise that she's putting on, and I think it surprises her a little bit. I liked that. We see this conflict between Carter and Rick start and end all in one episode, and quite frankly, I thought it was going to be drawn out a little bit longer than one episode, but it seems like by the end of this episode, things are moving very, very quickly, and there's so much packed into this episode that it's hard to tell where we're going from here. Something that was talked about on The Talking Dead after the episode aired was that Carter and Rick are really opposites of each other, and either one could have ended up in the other's situation. It really shows us that you're a product of your environment. Your environment shapes who you've become. Rick is hardened and lacks compassion, whereas Carter is scared, he's sheltered, but he's also this voice of reason against this crazy, risky plan that could really devastate Alexandria if it goes wrong. And if there had been different circumstances for each of these characters, either one of them could have been in the other's position right now. And I really liked that even though Carter was in disagreement with Rick, we were still able to understand where he was coming from. I want to talk a little bit about Jesse now. It won't take too long, and there are going to be possible comic spoilers in this short talk about Jesse, so just be warned. I won't give away a lot of details, but just be warned there's possible comic spoilers. So Jesse doesn't seem to want to have anything to do with Rick, which is quite different from her comic counterpart after Rick kills Pete in the comics. In the comics, her character was much more of a victim of this domestic abuse, and she ran towards Rick after Pete's death. She came for comfort, and we still may see something like this in the episodes of the TV show, but I'm really leaning towards Jesse's in the TV show seems much stronger than her comic counterpart. She doesn't seem like a victim. She even tells Rick that she will fight, that she is learning to use a gun from Rosita. Rosita's gonna help her and the kids. And she doesn't seem to really want anything to do with Rick. I'm hopeful that we'll still see her demise just like in the comics, but with the No Way Out arc quickly approaching, even faster than originally thought of, our relationship between her and Rick developing so quickly seems a bit unlikely, which begs the question, if she doesn't get her same death in the comics, who will? Because we know that death was so awesome and amazing and just like crazy, begging the question, what would you do if you were put in that situation? I cannot imagine that the writers, showrunner would just not use that death for someone. I'm sure it will happen. I'm hoping it will still be Jesse, but you know, this No Way Out arc is approaching much faster than we anticipated. So to see a relationship meaningful enough to make her death effective in that way, developing this quickly, like I said, it just seems unlikely at this point, unless they do push the No Way Out arc, you know, farther back than it seems. But it seems like things are moving very quickly, so I can't imagine that it's too far away. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. What do you think about Jessie and how she's acting in the series compared to how she was acting in the comics? I definitely want to hear your guys' opinions so we can talk more about this. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about Maggie and this "is she pregnant" thing that we maybe found out in the show. Now there are potential comic spoilers in this portion of the video as well, so be warned. So, is Maggie pregnant? We got a brief hint of maybe something like that in the meeting when Rick is going over the plan and everyone's trying to figure out what to do about this herd of zombies that is in the quarry. We hear Glenn tell her that she should stay behind and keep an eye on Deanna because Deanna is much needed for this community still. But Maggie turns to him and she says, "That's not the only reason," or "we know that's not the only reason," something like that. And he nods in agreement. But we don't get any further hints as to what the other reason is. Now we know that Glenn has always been concerned about Maggie going out on runs and doing things that aren't safe. Obviously because he wants her to stay protected, he loves her. They've already been separated once and it would be horrible for them to be separated again. But you get the feeling that there is a very specific other reason that is not just because he wants her to stay safe. So is she pregnant? Comic fans will know that she does get pregnant in the comics and it's a very big story there. So are we already there? Are we at the point where she gets pregnant? It's a very big possibility. I'm a little unsure at this point what I really think. I think it's definitely a possibility, but I almost think that it may still be too soon. So what else could be the reason? Let me know what you guys think. Do you think she's pregnant? Let me know as well in the comments so we can talk about that more. Let's move on. So this whole episode revolves around this plan to lure all of the walkers in the quarry. Now there are some 1,000+ walkers in this quarry away from Alexandria because, you know, they are slowly slipping through, and the more walkers that are attracted there and that fall into the quarry, the bigger this herd gets, and it's already huge and would be devastating if it came to Alexandria. So, you know, Rick comes up with this awesome plan that seems like it could work, but it's crazy and a lot of things could go wrong. It seems like it could work, so they're putting this plan into motion throughout the entire current time frame in this episode. And everything seems like it's going to plan. Everything seems like it's going well. But let me tell you, as soon as I saw how many walkers were in that quarry, we knew that this plan, something was going to go wrong. I mean, there's just no way it could go off smoothly. And being a comic fan, I also knew that this is where we were going with this. Something would happen. It was unfortunate that Carter's death started the downfall of this plan. It seemed like everything, you know, was corrected by the gunshots after he was put down, but then we hear this car horn blast, and it's loud, incredibly loud, and it's ongoing. It doesn't stop, and we just see the whole plan fall apart. I mean, there's no going back from this at this point. The walkers are headed towards the horn, which is likely back at Alexandria. Now I'll have to double check, and we'll talk about this more in my Dead Ahead predictions video, which I'll be putting up next. But I believe that the quarry was at least 20 miles away from Alexandria. So Rick and crew do still have time to get back there, hopefully safely, to warn the Alexandrians, but before the herd gets there. But we do know that something else is going on there. So we'll discuss thoughts and theories on that in the Dead Ahead predictions video coming up next, but feel free to leave your predictions in the comments so that we can talk about it more in the Dead Ahead video. All in all, I thought this episode was awesome. This was a great, amazing season premiere. This whole story was told beautifully. They integrated this flashback scenes perfectly with the current scenes, and it just meshed so well, and it was so easily understandable. And I liked that they put in the flashback scenes as black and white. Now, yes, I would have liked to see a lot of those scenes in color. It was a little bit hard at first to see everything, to be able to focus on everything, it being black and white. Yeah, I would have liked to see them in color, but if the episode had been all in color and there was no difference between the current and the flashbacks, it would have been so confusing. You guys cannot tell me you would not have been confused. We probably would have been able to wrap our brain around it, but it would have been a lot harder. And I think trying to focus on differentiating between what's past and what's present would have taken away from the conversations that they were having, and we wouldn't have been as focused as we were able to be with that differentiation. Differentiation. You guys know what I mean. I cannot say that word. I also love that there's this cliffhanger ending that really keeps us hungry and wanting more. I cannot wait until episode 2 coming next week. The time is gonna go so slow until then. So in my next video, we'll take a look at what's dead ahead in the next episode, episode 2 coming next week. In the meantime, let me know what your thoughts and predictions are in the comments below, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I will see you next time. Bye.